Hello, everyone. I know some of you from years ago, decades ago, when I used to witness and give pro-life testimony, when all of us were much younger but still just as good looking. The year was 1964. The Beatles made their epic journey to the United States. My hero, Dr. Martin Luther King, won the Nobel Peace Prize. Magical movies like My Fair Lady and Mary Poppins were the talk of Hollywood. And the U.S. Surgeon General finally issued a report that confirmed something that everyone already knew, that cigarette smoking caused cancer. And a young couple in Chicago, struggling in their marriage, dealing with financial problems and a young son with asthma, found out that they were pregnant with their second child. This was a bright, good-looking, and intelligent couple. This was when there were only about 5 channels on the television, just a handful of newspapers. More women were starting to go to college, and more sophisticated types were talking about the quick, safe, and easy solution that could take care of the problem that my parents were in, namely their pregnancy with me. There was just one problem. Abortion was not legal in Chicago in 1964. So they opted for an unconventional procedure recommended by a local doctor involving hormone shots into my mother's womb, a hormone known as Pitocin, which is still used in end-stage pregnancies to induce labor, just so that their unexpected problem could go away and they could get on with their lives. They didn't count on one little thing. I'm a pretty stubborn cookie. And without going into too much detail, I could tell you that they were both shocked when, after a couple tries and some early signs of miscarriage, I was still hanging in there. At some point, they threw in the towel. And despite being almost 6 feet tall, I was born premature and very, very tiny several months later, incubated, but ready, it seemed, to someday tell the story that I'm telling you right now. And what is the moral of that story? If abortion was legal in 1964 in Chicago, I would not be standing here today. I would not have my Stanford University degrees. I wouldn't be married to the same man for over 25 years, for 25 years, this coming October 7th, and I know he's got a wonderful surprise gift ready planned for me. Actually, he wrote me a song. That's the gift I was most pleased with, so I already have my present. I wouldn't have 4 amazing children or a career as a communications professional. And above all, for purposes of this day, I wouldn't be alive to be the caregiver for my mother, who is now permanently bedridden and alone. I have been my mother's caretaker for the past 12 years, her emotional support most of my life, as she struggled for decades with mental illness, post-abortion syndrome from a subsequent abortion that she had hidden for years. Though my parents' struggles wound up in divorce, I am really grateful and really humbled to be able to state that both of them stand behind me in my presence here today, representing their story. They wanted me to tell other people what they didn't know at the time. That they were misled, that they believed the hype, that they bought into the line that I and my sibling after me were just a clump of cells, a disposable commodity whose fate that they could decide. I am so proud of my parents and my entire family's support in standing here today. And I am so grateful for the strength that they put into my weak knees. In fact, my mother has often stated, please go tell other women what I didn't know. The fact is that they were victims too, and so was I. I often think about how easier my life might have been if I had had that sibling or friend growing up after my father and mother divorced, and now as a possible companion to me in my caregiving for my mother, or possibly an uncle or aunt with children who could be cousins, additional support group to my children. Friends, we're living in a world of choice, but let us not get entangled in the sticky, icky mess. I have spoken for decades on the manipulation of words and media messages that push the pro-choice agenda forward. Going all the way back to the 90s, when I was blessed to be accompanied at churches, youth groups, and even World Youth Day under the great John Paul II, accompanied by my husband and my firstborn son, Luke John, who had become known as the pro-life baby because of his impeccable demeanor on stage as I would speak. And many of you may remember Luke John and prayed for him. Unfortunately, Luke John was later diagnosed with liver cancer at the age of 2.5, just one day after the birth of our second child. Luke John's short life was a gift to mine, and I wouldn't have given up one moment of it if my husband and I had known ahead of time how soon he would have had to leave us. No doubt we would have gone forward with that pregnancy, that child, anyway. And every day of the joy that we shared with him and the thousands of lives that he touched in his 4.5 years has certainly made its impact. Luke John passed away at 4.5, and I believe that he powerfully advocates for this movement from heaven, undoubtedly beside millions of voiceless babies whose lives he worked to help others understand were just as valuable as his. And after years of traveling and speaking in the early pro-life circles, burying our son, my husband and I settled into work and life, raising our subsequent 3 children. Until around 2005, when in my daily work as a communications specialist, a journalist, a nationally certified translator, a court-certified interpreter, I began to notice something that turned my stomach. That same deceitful agenda of twisted truths and half-lies was being transposed upon a culture I work with daily and love dearly, Latin America, where I had lived, studied, and worked. In documents and TV shows, in songs and YouTube videos and legislation, new trends and even new words began undermining the very roots of this culture and stripping it of its greatest source of strength, its faith and family. Words like choice, fetus, reproductive rights, and even a new strange term, interrupción, interruption, being used as a synonym for abortion to mask its reality, to make it sound nicer in one of the most pro-family cultures I'd ever known. To this day, the legal term used in legislation in Mexico regarding abortion is ILE, Interrupción Legal de Embarazo, or literally, the legal interruption of pregnancy. So I was asked through some professional colleagues as well as close friends in Mexico to share my witness at VitaFest 2013 in the booming cosmopolitan city of Querétaro, Mexico, in central Mexico. The story about my parents, their struggles, and their eventual change of heart. On a rainy day in one of Mexico's largest soccer stadiums, 23,000 people attended on buses, in carpools, and on foot. I prayed deeply for the strength I knew I would need to reach this many people with a 21st century message on abortion at a time when abortion was just beginning to sprout was a great privilege. I like to think I brought my A game. And as almost a casualty of what happens inside of the building that we are standing in front of, it's not all that hard to do. But what they didn't know I would bring as well was a passionate exhortation to avoid using words like choice and reproductive rights, when reproductive rights is the term most commonly used to refer to abortion, which is actually the opposite of reproduction. It is anti-reproduction, perhaps anti-reproductive right, if anything, if you break it down linguistically. And it was in Mexico, after several VitaFests, that the World Health Organization issued a paper affirming that abortion should not be included under the umbrella of reproductive rights, though it is a hotly contested issue. But as a linguist, I was compelled to highlight the inaccuracy of the word choice. So I begged Mexico to be very careful with word choice, and above all, for the sake of linguistic accuracy, to delete that lie of a word used for abortion that I had come to hate so much, interrupción. 22 years in a chair poring over document translations, interpreting in courtrooms and doctors' offices had prepared me well for that moment. I examined the word with them from the podium, my voice echoing and trembling as it is now, from a stage I never thought I would be on. I explained what perhaps many people hadn't taken the time to realize, that the word interruption, interrupción, is a complete linguistic failure in reference to abortion. Interruption? So someone just got in your way and you'll be getting rid of them. At the very least, linguistically, I could accept the word termination of pregnancy, though as a human being who could have been a casualty there, it was only slightly better. I begged Mexico, those 23,000 in attendance and hundreds of thousands more via broadcasts throughout Latin America, to remember the cornerstones of their passionate culture, their artisans and poets, their cuisine, their resources, historic figures like the great Mexican politician and priest Miguel Hidalgo, widely lauded as one of Mexico's most influential founding fathers. And of course, the patroness whose statue is in every Mexican home, believers and non-believers, Christians, Catholics, and atheists, Our Lady of Guadalupe is not absent in a single home that I have ever seen or ever been in. I encouraged them to become little Juan Diegos on that same perilous journey, to bring the message of truth and hope to others. After all, that was what I was trying to do, there as a gringo before them, speaking a second language with passion, but with trepidation. Not unlike the humble peasant, Saint Juan Diego, who had to do the same thing when he brought the message of the lovely lady to the bishop. And a huge shrine of hope and life was erected in Mexico City, which is now the center of Mexico's abortion industry, where legal interruptions of pregnancy are performed, at times by chaperoning women in from villages far away, promising them a dream weekend in the big city, maybe a chance to get out of a life in the small town, to find something more glittering, more shiny, while simultaneously taking care of their problem. At that first Vita Fest, and at many others I subsequently had the privilege of speaking at, with my husband performing with me, and at dozens more Vita Fests throughout Mexico in Latin America in the last 4 years, many passionate speakers stood up for life, for truth, and were at times imprisoned or otherwise punished for it. For my part, I reminded Mexican men not to be chameleons and turn away, change their colors for the first time in centuries when it came to such an important family decision as a newborn life. At the same time, I strongly reminded them to treat their wives, their girlfriends, their mothers, all women with equality and respect. And I insisted that Latina women understand the difference between sacrifice and abuse, and that they reject the latter and insist upon being treated with dignity and equality in their relationships, both personal and professional. Indeed, it is a message that knows no cultural bounds and applies just as powerfully here as it does anywhere. The legal right to abort, to interrupt the lives of unborn children, does not liberate women, but ensnares us. In fact, it turns us into commodities and our unborn children into collateral damages, and actually liberates men more than women, as they somehow philosophically walk away absolved from any connection to the choice that is being made inside Planned Parenthood. Even though men have everything to do with creating the condition that leads to the choice of a woman stepping through the doors of Planned Parenthood. This was a new message to many Latinos. I could see it by the women's faces and tears who approached me afterward. We covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time because we had a lot of work to do. My goal was to cut to the chase, jump over the decades that we have spent here in the United States of spiraling political debate over this issue, philosophical nonsense, linguistic imprecision, wounded women and families, and word manipulation. Friends, you well know that the word play is no accident. It was and continues to be a strategic delay tactic used by pro-choice groups to cloud the issue and dilute what actually happens here. And as for supporting and loving women, half of the babies that will be aborted today at Planned Parenthood throughout our nation are women. They deserve the same rights as their mothers. And in the process of traveling throughout South America, I was blessed to meet women like Olga in Durango, who was pregnant and spoke with me at the request of a priest before I spoke and then again after I spoke. She had her abortion plans already made. The trip to the big city was a go, and she approached me after my talk and decided not to abort that child. I met women like Maria in Michoacan who embraced me after I talked. An old woman half my size who buried her head in my belly and said she was finally able to let go of 40 years of grief of living with a forced abortion as a young woman. Then there was the passionate woman in Costa Rica who was so shocked when she realized the implications of that word, interrupción, that she stood in front of a packed assembly and thanked me and said that she felt she needed to devote part of her life to clarifying the myth of that word for others. Just one word, and she was right. I was recently on a forum online with judicial interpreter colleagues mulling over the correct translation for judicial assistant in Spanish, and one of my colleagues cited 16 possible meanings for the word assistant, quoting the Royal Spanish Academy, which is known to interpreters as La Real Academia Española. It is the centuries-old authoritative resource on the Spanish language, which still has not approved the use of interrupción with reference to abortion, and I pray it never does. And it would be a linguistic failure to do so. As we all know, interruptions are not permanent things. Interruptions continue after a pause. So this is something that I'm carefully watching, and I would ask for your prayers also. So going back to the lady from Costa Rica, she understood deeply within herself the whole power of the word thing and said that she would work to undo the confusion that that one word was causing. Removing the veil, simply providing some honesty that every woman really deserves if they're going to make this choice. I introduced the topic of the growing new arm of the pro-choice movement, assisted suicide. And I used the example of a hero of a man that our family has been blessed to know. Some of you may have known him as well. A local 6th-degree black belt, role model, and karate master, Sean McCormick from Oxford, Pennsylvania, who died of brain cancer after a valiant 5-year battle for every day. Master McCormick passed away naturally just 2 days before Brittany Maynard took her life legally in Portland, Oregon, also from brain cancer. Brittany's undeniably difficult choice was labeled on CNN and every major news station across our nation as death with dignity. While Sean's valiant, heart-wrenching choice to spend more time with his family, to see his daughter attend her first high school dance, to return to teaching karate at his dojang that his son now runs in his honor, to fly to specialists around the country until eventually passing away naturally, his story didn't even make the local paper beyond the obituary. I am not undermining the great struggle and horrendous plight of Brittany Maynard or any cancer victim. I have watched many of Brittany's videos and caught glimpses of her reasoning related to her own fear, and in some cases, sadly, a sense that she didn't want to become a burden to her family. Another glimpse of the culture of death that we live in. What I mean to do instead is to applaud Master McCormick's choice as death with dignity as loudly as anyone else's. We must not forget role models like Master Sean McCormick as we drunkenly search for truth in a world that seems to lack all meaning at times. But the truth must be mercifully and compassionately spoken, without guilt, but with mercy, with education, with love and outreach. Without these things, I wouldn't be standing here today. I know this from my own family, and you know this from the great work you do in the 40 Days for Life ministry as prayer and sidewalk warriors, rescuing one child, one mother at a time. Before my mother's own abortion, she frequently mentioned to me growing up how she had called my grandfather for advice right before she left for the airport. My old school Russian grandpa, a saint of a man in many other ways, told her, "Go do it. It's nothing." She was hesitant but still went through with it. No one was standing on the sidewalk in New York offering counseling to confused hormonal women in the 1960s. The mercy we work with and which we pray with must be great, because the pain here is great. Because this so-called choice is horrific. And because so many people don't even think twice about what's happening. Few people step back or take a few minutes from their cell phone to realize that there are two kinds of choices in life, good ones and bad ones. In my opinion, this building represents a lot of bad choices, bad counseling, bad legislating for millions of women who later came to regret their abortion, and when they did so, Planned Parenthood was nowhere in sight to help them heal or even acknowledge their grief. However, we should not fail to thank and applaud a very good choice recently made by 3 women from this very clinic, nurses and now ex-employees who came forward to expose serious health risks and unsanitary, unethical practices taking place here. Even in very dark places, good choices can be made. Friends, the Olgas and the Marias are everywhere in Latin America, and they desperately need our help and our prayers. The heavily pro-choice media would have us believe that everything is our right, but it's clear that some things we simply cannot choose. Our parents, our nationality, our eye color, our height, the list is long. Likewise, choosing the fate of another human being is not a right. By law, in this great nation I love, just because another person's life is inconvenient or out of line with my plans doesn't give me a right to terminate it. I can't walk into a supermarket with a 5-minute timeline for shopping and groceries. And if I find myself in the checkout line behind a mother of 4 with a huge shopping cart way behind schedule, I don't have the right to terminate her life simply because it didn't fit in with my plan. Moreover, that same person's life, while inconvenient in that particular checkout line, might prove to be the miracle I need later when I find out they're the only doctor in the country to help fight my type of illness or talk my kid into going to college. Just like in my mom's case, who now says that I am everything to her and frequently says to me, "You are my life." As for choice with regard to women's rights, yes, all women have the choice to be a mother or not. But that choice is ours before we become pregnant, not after. Once we are pregnant, we have made the choice and should responsibly and lovingly accept the consequences, just as we are urged to do as a nation in every other realm. Over 95% of abortions are performed as a form of birth control. Let's start there. Let's love each other. Teach our children, our neighbors, to make good choices that will build them up, make them feel happy and whole, not tear them down. And if it's a word game that the pro-choice movement is insisting on, I am up for the challenge. As for me and my house, we are pro-good choice, and we will serve the Lord. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bridget. That was a beautiful talk. And I didn't get to really introduce her like I should have. Bridget is an international pro-life speaker and speaks in 5 languages, Bridget? 5 languages. And as she said, educated at Stanford. We're very, very honored to have her, and also her husband, songwriter, who's also internationally acclaimed as a songwriter. What's your website, Joe? I wanted to give that out.
JosephLeeHooker.com.
JosephLeeHooker.com.
And ProGoodChoice.org. Please join the Pro-Good Choice movement, because that's what we're trying to encourage, good choice.
Yes, good choice. Absolutely. Thank you so much for your witness today. It was beautiful, and we're so honored to have you with us.
I'm by all of you.
Not sure, Joe, if we can do another song in the rain. Probably not.
Right.
But
Can you do it?
we're really thrilled that at least Joseph Lee Hooker. Yep. And he has lots of CDs
He could do one.
on his website too.
He could do another one.
You think you can? Okay, we can hold the umbrella over for you.